Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I'm going to discuss some life principles and how that applies with sports and draw those parallels with our spiritual walk and journey. So, from an example of our football team, our coaches do extensive research on watching film for our up and coming opponents. So, they research their plays, their tendencies, how they like lining up, how do they run their offense, how do they run their defense, and how do we counteract that with our practices and in looking at ways that we can surprise them. And we know our opponents are doing the same thing, so what do we do to change our game and rhythm of our practice and our play calling to change things up so we're not going to be predictable and consistent? So those are things that happen, in the sports world. And how do we deal with life, though? Sometimes we work for companies that have protocols or have standards that we have to meet and duplicate. Some have sales pitches that they love having everyone on the same page with how to address, a deal or closing a deal. Or in manufacturing, how do we do things consistently to have the product that turns out to be very much the same every time around? So, but how do we address that in life in general? So, by God's principles are in the Bible, and we need to live by them and read them and be conscious of how are we addressing our life and how are we growing and learning. How do we deal with our finances? How do we deal with other people? How do we deal with children and raising them? So God's principles don't change, and they're in the Bible, and they cover everything pretty much under the sun. And how do we address those? So that's our playbook for life. And if we're being faithful and servants of God, that's what people should be able to identify, that we're living from a biblical standard and not our own standards. So just a little bit of insight to what you may be going through, and certainly that God calls us to read the Bible, seek wise counsel, and in those problem areas in our life, that we can address that with God's playbook or God's plan of reading the Bible. He wants us to be successful. And like our coaching staffs, they want the teams to be successful. And so, but God's playbook is great, and we can trust it and live by it. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and those cloudy days are going to come on, and we need to just keep our trust and faith alive, continue in God's word, and trust his playbook for our life. Well, thanks for tuning in, and look forward to catching up with you later. Take care.